Hello and welcome to AI Product Mantra. We have today Sam Bhagwat, who's the CEO and founder of Mastra AI. And before this, he was also the founder of Gatsby. And in this interview, we'll try to understand his journey of how he started working, then founded Gatsby, and now working with Mastra AI, and also an author of the book Principles of Building AI Agents. Uh, and we'll try to understand his experiences of working with AI and AI agents and what is there for us to learn from his experiences and knowledge. So thanks a lot, Sam, for accepting the invite and coming here.
Thanks for having me, Akash. Really excited to chat.
Yeah. So Sam, if you could start telling us, how was your journey? How did you started working, and how did you come up with an idea of starting Gatsby, and then eventually now that you are the founder of Mastra AI, if you could describe the journey for the audience.
For sure. So, and I'll zoom out for a little bit for folks who are maybe less familiar. Gatsby was an open source React web framework, and still is, but less popular these days. It was sort of the best way to build React websites in the late 2010s and sort of early 2020s. So it started as an open source project in 2015. And I was working on that. I've been, which means like if we kind of count the years, I've been working in, open source JavaScript for the better part of the last decade. So I was working on the open source project with Kyle Matthews, and then we started a company together around Gatsby in 2017. And so we were then sort of like running the company and for about 6 years or so until we sold the company in 2023 to Netlify. And then I think like having spent, all the time sort of in the open source JavaScript world, just like there's kind of a huge amount you just sort of, and hundreds of thousands of developers sort of learned how to code, learned how to build web for the web, learned React via Gatsby. And so I think there's just a huge amount of lessons around making sort of accessible developer tools that are like easy for people to kind of get started with and but like have the sort of depth and complexity they need to like kind of like master a specific domain. And I think like, so I ended up starting Mastra last year with two of the sort of best engineers from Gatsby, Shane Thomas and Abhi Iyer. Um, and and so I think we then sort of like we then went to Y Combinator. We sort of raised a little bit of money. We brought over a lot of the engineers from Gatsby, and so I think like together, with Mastra, which is a TypeScript framework for building AI agents, right? And then we wrote a book. A lot of the lessons that we've really taken with us from the web world into the AI world is sort of around kind of creating really good open source developer tooling that helps people sort of master a new domain.
Got it. And if you could also tell us, what was that one aha moment which led you to, realize that we will need a framework for AI agents? What was that?
Yeah, so back in kind of like early October of last year, we were just trying to build some agents in TypeScript, and we were kind of confused why all the tooling seemed to be like Python first, and so we just kind of looked at each other and we are like, gosh, it feels like we know how to do something about this, and we were actually working on something different at the time. We were working on a business application, but we were just like, gosh, it feels like we actually need this like framework and we know a lot about making frameworks, so maybe we should be doing this instead. And so the over the next day we kind of just completely switched what we were doing, started building Mastra, and
Got it. And if I can ask, while you look back, were there any tough moments or were there any failures which led you to reshape and approach Mastraya differently than how you were approaching your earlier companies which you founded?
I think there's like two different ways of answering that question. The first is to sort of talk about there were a lot of discrete product learning moments where we were like really excited about a particular way of doing things and like, just turned out to be the wrong way of doing things and we had to like learn and iterate from there. Um, and then I think like then there's sort of the the like what did we kind of take and learn with us from last time, right? Which I think are kind of two separate things. So maybe I can answer this sequentially.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think like so we started building Mastra in October, and we actually initially were kind of building it as instead of like a code first tool, we were actually building it as sort of a config first tool with a UI for building agents and workflows. Um, and when we did that, we brought it to NextConf right at the end of October 2024, and we showed it to a lot of people.
Hmm.
And a lot of people that we like really respected that we knew from the web world, we just, and we like, we showed it to Jared Palmer, who was at Vercel at the time. We showed it to, just a number of folks. And we got a lot of, well, that's nice, that's nice. And as a developer, when you bake something and you kind of show it to someone and they're like, "That's nice," you're like, "Well, either I've like showed it to the wrong person or I built the wrong thing." And we were
Hmm.
pretty sure we showed it to the right people. So then, like, we were pretty sure we built the right thing. And we kind of went in to sort of introspect like what happened, and we were just like, "Okay, so all these developers are basically looking at this config verse tool, and they're kind of saying, well, it's a cool thing maybe for somebody else, but it's not for me." And that's what they
Hmm.
were saying. And so we were like, okay, we need to completely re throw out our old API. We kept some things from that. We kept what became the Mastra Developer Playground, which is one of the features that people like the most about Mastra. It's sort of a local playground that helps you get started really quickly. But we completely changed the API from a config first approach to a code first approach.
Okay.
And then, we sort of over the next like three weeks, we kind of completely rebuilt it, and then we kind of launched again. And then the feedback we got is, oh, this is really cool. Oh, and also it's like buggy and like this didn't work.
Hmm.
That's like a very different type of feedback, right? The feedback there is like you built the right thing, you just need to like fix all the bugs, right? And so that was kind of a better once we heard that kind of feedback, then we knew we were on the right path.
Hmm. Got it. You also spoke about, you are also part of the YC Winter 2025. So how was that experience? And well, I see a lot of people are part of YC. So how does that help founders and companies?
Yeah, YC is incredible. I mean, one way to think about it is that, imagine like you as a founder are this like ember. You're hot, but there's like some winds blowing around you and like they're kind of cooling you down. What you're trying to do as a founder is like usually very difficult. And when you're in YC, you're sort of this ember that gets placed around a lot of embers. And so it's easier to like burn more brightly when you're surrounded by a lot of other talented and ambitious and hardworking people who are also trying really hard to make their thing work. That's not just an energy and morale thing, it's also like a sort of like you learn a lot from each other and like, oh, I tried this and it didn't work, or I tried that and it sort of worked, and then like I did this other thing. The YC networking community is sort of unparalleled. So, I think it's actually a little unusual as a second time founder,
Hmm.
that's like, that I did YC, but I think what we saw is that like YC is, YC is the YC for second time founders. YC is the YC for all, and it's just really, I mean, I think if you sort of zoom out and you look at the startup ecosystem more broadly, if any particular like startup or any particular like venture capital firm or whatever disappeared, probably there'd just be some replacement overnight, right? For
Hmm.
like some competitor would like, but like if YC disappeared, like there's nothing else that would replace it, right? Like it's just this really singular thing. And so I've become very, sort of YC pilled, as they say, very much, hey, you should apply to YC, you should do YC. If you have the chance to do YC. And I tell that to, basically every founder I meet.
Got it. Coming to your book, which you have written, right? So how did you decide actually to write the book, Principles of Building AI
Mhm.
Agents, while you are already running a startup?
Yeah, so we were in the middle of YC, and we were just like every day we were doing some whiteboarding session with another YC founder that was building agents, and we'd kind of walk through, what they were doing, and we'd offer them some suggestions, and we were just like talking every day to people building agents, and it sort of felt like as we were having, these 30 or 40 or 50 conversations, there were like a lot of these commonalities, and some of these commonalities we were writing up in our documentation and our and we're writing some blog posts about it. But one day, like, we're also just like the three of us are very, and part of this is like our background. being from the open source JavaScript ecosystem, which cares very much about the new user experience, right? The beginner's experience. Part of it is just our inherent like who we are as people. I mean, my co-founder Shane sort of he that was kind of like a summer boot camp for high school students, right? So you just have to care a lot about teaching and education around that kind of thing. So, but like one day, like Shane, my co-founder, he turns to me and he's like, Sam, what if, we're doing all these sessions, like, what if you wrote a book? And I'm like, yeah, maybe. And I write pretty fast, so I sort of I then took like an hour and I kind of like, well, if I was gonna write a book, what would the outline look like? And I got pretty happy with the outline. I was like, okay. So then I took a weekend and I was like, let me take a stab at writing this book. And I
Hmm.
like ended up with like a decent chunk of it. And I was like, okay, I can finish it. And then so it ended up being like 2 weekends and a couple working days. That was like the first edition. And then like, there were some more changes we need to make for the second edition.
Yeah.
But like when we printed out the book and we started sharing it, right? So we started distributing it. We brought it to our YC demo day. We started bringing it to SF AI events. And people were like, wow, this is so cool, and not just like the idea of the book was cool, but like also they'd read it and be like, oh, this is really useful. Like, I've been getting this bit of information here and that bit of information there and the other bit of information
Yeah.
there. And then when you kind of put them all together, but you've put them all together here in this book, and like when you put all that information together in the book, then I can kind of, coherently read through it and understand, well, now here's how those pieces of information fit together. So I think people kind of started giving us that feedback, and so we were like, well, that's when we were like, maybe we should keep, spending effort on it. So we started printing, thousands of copies and handing them out, at meetups. I started posting about it on LinkedIn.
Hmm.
And so a lot of people started commenting on my LinkedIn posts. We probably print at this point print sort of like thousands of copies every week and just sort of hand them out to folks.
Yeah.
It's really been like we weren't like we didn't set out trying to do this. Like it wasn't like part of some master plan or something. It just kind of worked and it kind of kept working, so we kept doing it more and more, and
Yeah.
uh
That's
it's
nice.
been yeah. I mean, we've just been really like really like overwhelmingly like overwhelmed in a good way by the community feedback. It's just been awesome.
Got it. I also went through the book and I saw you also have code snippets whenever it was required, while when you're creating an agent or how do you create an MCP server or the client server, you have
Yeah,
all those code snippets from the Mastra AI point of view, right? So it's
yeah,
also a handbook to understand or get started with Mastra AI. This is what I also recognized. And
yeah.
there's just one more thing that I wanted to ask you was if there, for the listeners, if there was just one principle from the book which you want them to remember, what would that be and why?
That's a really good question. I think the most important thing that I'd want people to take away from the book is maybe if I can say two things, is that okay?
Yeah, yeah.
Number one is sort of like here are all the things you need to build agents. You need a model, you need a provider, you need a prompt. You probably need memory, you need to be able to call tools, you might need workflows. You're gonna need evals if you want to productionize it and tracing. Um, so those are like the core, like these are the core concepts. These are the primitives you need to know. This is the list, right? And then the second thing is, it is easy to, it is fairly easy to build an agent. It is hard to productionize an agent. And so right now, but you can do it.
Hmm.
You just need to keep going, right?
Yes.
And there's a system and a process to doing that. Because I think that I think that a lot of people start um, they start out and they build this prototype and they're like really excited about it. And then they're like, okay, like time to ship it into production. And then they're like, why doesn't it work? And like
Hmm.
the answer is it does work at an 80% accuracy rate, but maybe you need a 95% accuracy rate. And so you just need to like, hey, let me like figure out let me like look at a lot of data. Let me like list some failure reasons. Let me like make some success metrics. Let me make an eval scaffold, which is sort of like a, CI suite, right? For your agent, right? And let me just keep iterating. Let me, tweak the prompt. Let me tweak the data that's coming in, do some context engineering.
Hmm.
Right? There's a system to doing all these things. And if you just sort of give up because, you realize that you're 80% your 80% accuracy agent is not what you want to ship into production, you've gotten some of the way, but you've kind of you there's you can do it if you just keep working at it, right? Like
Hmm.
it's really just a function of time and following the right effort, the right process with enough effort.
Got it. I have a similar question around it because I also try to build agents on applications which are more visual in nature. For example, on
Yeah.
N8N or Langflow.
Hmm.
I give a demo, I like it, people like it, but if I have to put it to production,
Hmm.
I'm not very sure because sometimes the results are not accurate even while I'm testing it. So
Yeah.
I recently also read through the concepts of evals even in your book. So, how do you look at evals? Because some of the generic evals which I studied on Langfuse and Arise, they would give you inputs like hallucination or how accurate it is. But how do you look at evals? Should we go beyond these metrics?
I think the metrics are a starting point, but keep in mind that the metrics are like are like a scorer. So, and if you're playing a cricket game, someone can say, well, hey, they just got a wicket, or like, oh, he hit a six or whatever. But like the scoring in itself doesn't tell you how to become a better batsman,
Hmm.
right? There's a lot of things you need to, it tells you whether you're succeeding at becoming a better batsman or not, but there's still a lot of skill that goes into swinging the bat. And that's thing, and that's the process of, oh, okay, like let me do some context engineering here. How do I get more relevant things into the context window? Maybe
Hmm.
there's too much in the context window and I need to do some targeted compression. Where should my compression happen? Um, I need to, oh, looks like I have actually some invalid information that got some context poisoning that happened. How do I prevent the context poisoning? And like, there's a sort of a branch of things that you can do here. Maybe I should, this particular workflow is like working pretty well, but like this workflow, I should actually make it less agentic and more sort of explicit. And so I'm gonna, instead of asking an agent to do things, I'm gonna put some guardrails around, well, if the agent responds this way, we're actually gonna retry. And then, until we get a response in like a specific format, for example, maybe,
Hmm.
we're going to reject the JSON blob until it has this particular key in the JSON blob. And then, we're just going to keep running that loop until we get that key in the JSON blob. For example, like I'm just, I'm sort of giving a few examples of what you might be doing along the way.
Got it. I also had a question because you also told that you released a second edition quite quickly. So,
Yeah.
what changed in the the AI world that you had to quickly release another edition?
Yeah. I mean, so there were a few things, but the biggest one was MCP.
Okay.
Yeah. Now there were sort of what happened kind of between February and March was that also we had this sort of the Studio Ghibli moment where the image generation became good. So there were a few other things as well. But the big one that like we're like, well, we can't have a book on building agents not mention MCP.
Hmm.
We have to. So it was just kind of like we have to do that. We're working on a third edition, so we'll have a third edition in time for our TypeScript AI conf in November.
Got it. And if for an audience, if you could explain, what AI agent is, as if to somebody who's from
Yeah.
the product world, how would you explain that to them?
Yeah, so an agent is basically a way of, taking a large language model, like open like any of OpenAI or Anthropic's models, ChatGPT or Cloud. So it's a way of taking a large language model and sort of harnessing it to solve a repeatable task that you could embed in a piece of software. Um, and so in order to do that, your agent will need to probably now it, it's like there's like a spectrum of things that so on the low end you could just have an agent sort of making a decision between, well, we could do thing A or thing B depending on what the agent says, and that's
Hmm.
like that is somewhat agentic, but it's like a low level of agency. But on the higher level of agency you have like agents doing things like calling tools, which are basically functions. They'll run in a loop. And if you go into, Lovable or Replit agent as a product
Yeah.
person or Cursor, or Windsurf as an engineer, right? That you can see what an agent is doing. This agent is writing code, it's executing code, it's And like, oh, does this code run? No. Okay, I'm gonna feed the error message back up top, and I'm gonna try again, right? Like that's like the exam. That's the, you
Yeah,
know,
the think, act, and observe, and yeah, that's a cycle.
exactly. Yeah, and like those, those are sort of relatively more agentic. You could have an agent as decider, and it's like somewhat agentic, but like what makes these code agents more agentic is like they're calling tools to get information. They're executing code and then they're retrying and they're running in a loop. And until they feel like the output is good enough to sort of send back to the user and say, okay, we're done.
Mm, got it. And in your experience, because you speak to a lot of people, when they start building agent, what are some of the challenges or the problems they face and they get stuck at?
There's a few, so I mean, the I think like number one is like they're just not sure how to get started. They hear about all these things and they're like, what do I do? And like how do I start? And so um that point is where we try to point them to Mastra, right? To say like, hey, here's a framework. We have an agent primitive. You can say, agent equals new agent, and then like pass it in
Mm,
pass it in an object with keys and values, and then you get an agent, right? And we give you a playground. So like number one is I don't know how to start. Number two is sort of I started, but like I kind of don't know how to um improve it. And usually what that means is that like you understand one of the primitives, but you don't know. I know agents, but I don't know what tool calling is, or I don't know what workflows are, I don't know what memory is. It's like you don't know the next step. And so we just kind of like, great, you got the
mm,
first primitive. Here's the next five primitives for you. You can use them whenever you want, just kind of like walk through it. And we sort of just give examples for each one. And then like the third point I think is like, okay, I built this prototype, but I don't know how to bring it into production. And so those
mm.
are like 3 points that we see people getting stuck at.
Got it. I would also like to speak about the memory part that you spoke.
Yeah.
Like, how do we look at it? Because sometimes it's you can consider a short memory or a long memory. Because sometimes we can train the LLM through fine tuning, or we can use the RAG.
Yeah.
But there are also other concepts which are coming up. I was reading about Memento, which kind of stores whatever decisions it has taken in the past and learns from it. But how do we
Mhm.
look at memory when we talk about AI agents?
Yes, so there's a few different types of memory. I think like let's just start with like, what we call like semantic recall. So semantic recall is like if you ask me about a topic, like if you ask me what I did last weekend, I'll kind of, I'll sort of like go think about it, like I'll search in my head for like events associated with last weekend, then I'll sort of join it with the last messages that we've been sharing into my context window, and then I'll kind of like synthesize and like respond, yeah, I was like hanging out with my kids, we were having fun together, like that kind of thing, right? So I'll give you an answer like that. And so like that's sort of the concept of semantic recall is just I can look, throughout my whole long-term memory of like all the events that have ever happened, but I'm not going to pull the whole set of events. I'm just going to kind of search. And so we implement that with RAG, and we embed all the chunks of text in the chat queue. Not to get into too much detail, there are other types of memory like working memory,
Hmm.
episodic memory. And then some of what you're talking about is actually, I wouldn't categorize it as memory. I would categorize it as agent learning. So an agent that can sort of feed back the results from its actions into its execution context in a way that improves that. Typically, that's known as agent learning. Um, why I sort of make that distinction is like agent learning is a hard problem. People
Hmm.
have not figured out how to do good agent learning. Memory is more of a solved problem. We have benchmarks on memory. We have been like there's one called long mem eval that we published a blog post about recently. There's pretty good benchmarks on memory on the different kinds of memory and what you do to optimize that. Agent learning is a harder problem right now. We haven't
Hmm.
figured that one out yet.
Got it. I also want to speak about, the graph-based workflows, which are a
Hmm.
little bit technical because I was also working with LangChain, which does not have those
Yeah.
capabilities, but LangGraph does have it. So if there is a simple analogy which you have it in your mind, which would probably help a lot of non-coders of how to
Yeah.
go ahead and, work with graph-based workflows.
Yeah, so I would sort of say like, imagine, imagine that you're making a Zapier workflow or something like that, kind of no code tool. You're sort of defining some logical branches and you're saying, well, we're going to go, we're going to execute these in parallel and then we're going to kind of join the result together. And like that is the concept. So the reason that graph-based workflows are helpful is that it is often helpful to decompose a problem into multiple subparts and work on them separately. Or it's helpful to have some sort of logic where you can like, retry. Right, for example, like which is like, hey, I did step three, but then I went back and I needed to do step two again and then step three again, right? So there are all these sort of concepts. So we have kind of a workflow
Hmm.
primitive that you can use to define your workflow.
Okay.
And people have various ways that they like to do this. Like our way of doing it is, for the coders in the room, like it's more of like a fluent syntax where you're using like A dot then, B dot then, C dot branch, D, E. And so you can kind of read it from top to bottom, which we think is actually the right way of building a framework around that. Others have different approaches, and
Hmm.
I'm happy to debate the merits of that. But I think like the way that we kind of do it, then like we also have a visual workflow builder. And so with the visual workflow build, like that's part of the local development environment. And so you can actually like it actually compiles the workflows that you've written and sort of displays them there so you can test them out and you can actually see them execute step A, step B, step C, step D,
Hmm.
step E. Which, again, if you've used like a tool like Zapier, that's also something if you're like executing a Zapier workflow,
Yes.
it's kind of nice to see everything and to see the output at every step along the process and to see the output associated with the step and oh, there was an error here and like that kind of thing. So in our mind, the way that we've done it kind of blends the best of it's code first, so you define it in code, but you also get this nice kind of like execution playground where you can see it actually unfolding if you're just trying to test and make sure it works okay, which is, sort of a non-trivial thing to do.
Got it. And how do you look at, for the non-coders, let's say for the product managers or the
Mhm.
QAs, how would, their role change with the AI agents or a agent-driven products?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple things. Like in general, with AI, I think, folks in coding adjacent roles, I just see lots of folks. I have lots of like smart PM friends that sort of say, "Hey, like the last time I like actively was in, an IDE was when I was writing Ruby on Rails back in 2008 or whatever." And but then they'll say, well, I've started using Lovable or Replit Agent to write, full stack TypeScript code. So I think one thing is just more broadly as part of this whole AI world, like you need to be spending more time in these sort of like vibe coding tools, not building production apps, but maybe building a prototype,
Hmm.
and sort of playing around with ideas so you can see the merits of them, but then also without, maybe, but then also like maybe like once you've iterated a little bit, being like, hey, I want to propose this prototype for everyone. What do we think about it? And it's just like a much more productive conversation than,
Hmm.
maybe another approach. So I would say like that's like the first thing that I'd say, just like because AI is changing so much of that. The second thing I'd say is that specifically in AI engineering products, where you as the PM will often get involved is when the team starts, getting what the team is going to do, and they're going to do a good job of it, is they're going to build a prototype, and they're going to get everybody excited about it. But like I said, like that's when the long hard slog of eval starts, of
Hmm.
like, hey, we need to productionize this thing. The good news is that like you as a like a lot of that is about, hey, can we look at a lot of data? Can we categorize and classify the failure reasons? Can we sort of like make a bunch of metrics and see how our metrics, figure out why our metrics are going up and down and figure out which of our failure reasons are related to which metrics, right? And it turns out that those are actually things as a PM that
Hmm.
you're quite good, at, right? Like it's a new domain, sure, but like you are quite experienced doing these sorts of, things just, in terms of like overall application quality. And so like it's, the if what we see is that the engineers will sort of like lean in hard on step one when they're getting a prototype, and the
Hmm.
PMs will sort of be like, kind of like cheering them on, right? And then like when it starts to get productionized, the good PMs are going to lean in and like, okay, we're going to drive this car together now, and we're going to figure out what it takes to get it over this productionizing hurdle. We'll figure out what the metrics are. We'll figure out like I'll go through, I'll comb through the data, right, and I'll bring you some like useful tidbits from it. And that's when we really see, the PM skill set from a good PM really shine. And you can actually sometimes like, you can have great engineers that like kind of get discouraged because they're just like, like they it's not necessarily intuitive that they need to do this step back analytical type work, or
Hmm.
even if they do it, maybe they're not able to do it in the depth of the sort of the depth that they would need to productionize it. But then like you as a PM may be able to like lean in and actually like get the project over the hump, so to speak, and then like actually help push this thing into production.
Got it. So what I understood was, probably PMs could start writing evals, which would make sense for their agentic workflow. But how do you also look at the testing? Because currently testers usually do either the testing for a function or integration testing. How would their role evolve
Yeah.
into this?
I mean, I think so. Some of it is, hey, can you sort of put on the PM hat a little bit and like not just say, hey, this failed, but this is why it failed. And actually, I tried a variant of this prompt, and this variant of the prompt succeeded, or whatever. And so you need to like the nice thing about this is that a lot of what you might be modifying is English, or if you have sort of and this some of this depends on the development team building enough of sort of incorporating enough observability, right? So if you don't have any way of seeing the data, it's difficult for a tester to be, or even a PM to be helpful. But if the team has instrumented it in the right way, you as a tester can look through the data and say, aha, so what happened? It wasn't that the LLM failed. It was that our OCR actually returned an inaccurate representation of the underlying PDF. And so when our OCR did that, yeah, the LLM failed, but it failed because it was given the wrong context. And so we need, I've categorized 15 errors, and nine of them are the OCR, and six of them were the LLM reasoning incorrectly. So maybe let's start, I would advise that you go start fixing the OCR pipeline, and then we'll work on the LLM reasoning, right? That's something that, like, as a tester, you could very much do if you sort of put your mind in sort of the new world, if you're willing to be flexible and like think about how this works.
Got it. Coming to Mastra AI, I'm not sure if you're comfortable. If you could quickly show us a small demo of equivalent
Yeah,
of a hello world in Mastra, what would it look
sure. Yeah,
like?
I'll just do that. I'll
Yeah,
just do that really quickly.
yeah.
Let's see. Okay, so I guess I've already got this pulled up. Um, so let's see. So this was I kind of I was doing this with my son on Sunday. I just I started I started a project. I called it Oliver Test because that's my son's name. And then it walked me through the create workflow. It created a new project for me, installed it locally. And then it spun up this sort of like local dev server, which I'll kind of put here. And so my son and I modified it together. This is my 8-year-old son, by the way. Like,
Okay.
he's great, but like, we were modifying it. He has this game that he loves about called the Zoombinis, where you sort of help these like small creatures go through this like logical puzzle, and you solve all these logical puzzles and help them escape from their evil like overlords. I played it when I was a kid, and now I showed it to him, so now he likes it too. Um, so anyway, we sort of took the out of the box agent, and then we made this, this Zoom meeting thing, and so like this initially used to be like a weather agent, and I would ask it like, hey, what's the weather in San Francisco? And in response, because I've modified it with, for Oliver, like tell me about Zoom Beanie aisle. And then, now it's just, we've sort of and underlying, I think I put this in. Where did I put it in? Cursor windsurf. I'll just open it up here in Cursor. So the underlying code is right here. Okay. Yeah, so like if you look at sort of the underlying project, well, this used to be a weather
And
agent, and then we kind of changed the instructions to make it this like friendly, this friendly guide here. An agent has a name, it has instructions, it has a model. It has memory, so you can attach memory. It has tools, which we had tools before until we kind of changed it. But it has like a weather agent tool here that like this sort of get weather tool. And I can sort of reattach it if you want. So maybe I'll just reattach it and we can go back to um, you know, you here we go. This should be fine. And then we'll import yeah, other yeah, okay. Is it what's this called? Function is this? Oh, it's called weather tool. Okay. Uh, yeah, cool. Okay, and so we're gonna go back here and we're gonna refresh it. We're gonna notice that the chat history is saved. What's the weather in San Francisco? And now it's calling the
It's
weather
called tool,
tool.
yeah.
Yeah, and then it's giving me what the weather in San Francisco
Yeah.
is. And then you can even like this is like a workflow here, so you could say that. And so this is a very simple two-step workflow. It fetches the weather and then it plans some activities based on the weather.
Okay.
So we could sort of ask what the weather in San Francisco is, and then apparently it's airing out here. Why is it airing? I don't know, maybe I'll just
Uh,
try again.
So can I also drag and drop components or nodes like this in this, or is
Uh,
it just based on the code that it represents?
yeah, so it's based on the code. So
Okay.
like you can see here that the weather, the underlying code here is this, I'll just scroll to the bottom because it's easier to see the control flow. So,
Hmm.
there's two steps here. We've then dot then fetch weather dot then plan activities, and then each of those is a function. It's defined there, and then so the weather is defined there, and then the workflow sort of composes these two steps, together,
Got it.
to make yeah.
I
Uh,
had one more question. How do you look at the learning curve for people who do not come from TypeScript or from a non-coding background? How have you seen they started using Mastra AI?
I think, what I'd say is that, the JavaScript has always been the most accessible language for beginners. And for folks who come either from not a coding background or from a coding adjacent role like product or design or testing. And uh, the reason why is because it runs in the browser.
Hmm.
Um, and also just because the community cares very deeply about that. And so I won't say that it'll be easy per se, and I will say that like, if you're coming if you haven't written code before, I would maybe start building some stuff in Lovable, like build a web app for, your kid's school, or
Hmm.
build a web app for your friend group or something like that, right? I would start by doing that just to get the sense of like I'm writing some code that does a thing that I'm familiar with,
Got it.
right? Because we've all used web apps and websites, and so it's easier to iterate on the code when you understand the end product than sort of like, I don't really know how to code and I'm building an agent. That can be hard, but you know, that's not to say that we've seen folks do that, but spend an hour or two in Lovable first and just get familiar with like the feeling of make a change and then see the results, and here's what a function looks like and this kind of stuff.
Got it.
I will also say that like if you're using Mastra to build, we have this thing called the Mastra MCP server, and so like what the Mastra MCP server does is that so I'll just Google it here. So it's a MCP doc server, and so basically you can install it in Cursor or Windsurf, and so it will give the Cursor and Windsurf agents information about hey, like about Mastra, like the up-to-date information. And so they will always complete it in an accurate way because they have
Hmm.
information. Um, so I
Got
would
it.
say like the nice thing is that like you can vibe code your agent.
Hmm.
And this is not nice, not just for a product person, but also for a full stack developer. Like it is nice that we can not just vibe code our web apps, we can also vibe code our agents using, the MCP doc server of Mastra.
Got it. And how do you handle the evals part of it within Mastra AI?
Yeah, so I'll just kind of flip while I'm screen sharing. I'll flip over. We have this scorers API, and so the way that this works is that you create when you create an agent, you can actually add scorers to that agent, and so then you can see the results of that in the local playground.
Okay,
And so you can actually see a chart of I don't have a demo for that right now, unfortunately, but
no problem.
you could sort of like see um you could see, okay, like I have these five different scores, and a score is just, you might want, like, this one is like relevancy, for example, like is the answer relevant to the question? This one is safety, did they give the information
Uh,
any
but you're not
user
supposed
any
to.
information that might be dangerous to them or
Mm,
others, right? And so Uh, and so you have these various metrics for your agent, and then like you can imagine you just have a grid, right? And it's like run one, score one, score two, score three, score four, score five. Run two, score one, score two, score three, score four, score five. And you can track those over time, and you can say, hey, it went up. Score one went up, but score two went down, and then this sort of thing.
got it. I think you stop sharing screen. I have a couple of few more questions on evals itself. So I was also
Yeah,
reading something about, using LLM as a judge, and
yeah.
also there are included concepts of using human in loop so that we are not completely liable or relying on the AI or LLM. So how do you look at it?
Yeah. I mean, there's sort of like two flavors of evals here. There's kind of pure LLM. Well, there's so okay. So you could think about like a very basic, and we call these like NLP based
Hmm.
evals, where you're sort of evaluating the answer in some way that you can do in deterministic code without using an LLM. Maybe it's like Levenstein distance. Or maybe you're just checking, like, is a specific word in the response, right? Or there's a few others that are like more complicated than that, but you can kind of get the idea. Then you sort of like have the more advanced evals, like one of which is LLM as judge. Another is sort of like the kind of like ground truth. And so there's various ways of using this kind of concept of ground truth. One is to have a human go through and label a bunch of data. And, again, you can multiply that. You could have three different humans go through and label a bunch of data,
Yeah.
and then, only select answers where two of the humans agree on the answer, or something like that, right? Um, but I think that like most people use LM as judge because it's the easiest and the fastest way to start.
Hmm.
Um, it definitely has, you have to be careful to make sure that your judge is accurate. Sometimes you want to use a different model for judging than you use for generation. Sometimes you just want to have a human review you want to maybe start with your LLM as judge prompt on a sample data set, and like, essentially test whether it is aligned with humans, see how aligned your judge is with humans, and then once you feel like your judge is sufficiently aligned with humans, then you can, turn your
Eval.
judge
Hmm.
into an evaluator, into a scorer. Um, the most sort of like time, costly and time intensive version is always getting a human to do the data labeling. At the same time, if you want to get high accuracy, which is what we need to do to get into production, it's, I mean, so it is very important. Um, and it's most important in areas where there is a ground truth. So if you're making a legal chatbot or an
Hmm.
accounting chatbot, it's very important. If you're making a dev tools chatbot, a lot of times you can maybe just judge the accuracy by hand. You're like, this looks kind of right. No, that's completely wrong. Or if you're making a consumer type chatbot, so like, you know, like large sort of consume I'll just say that, like, very popular consumer chatbots will sort of like say that they're not thinking about evals as much because it's more of a consumer tool. But like
Hmm.
if you're doing a B2B tool, especially B2B tool in areas where there is a ground truth and people are very sensitive to wrong answers, like again, like legal or accounting, and there's a few other examples here, then like you're going to want to lean more on evals.
Got it. So Sam, since you speak to a lot of founders who are building products in various fields, how do or what do you think, in the next few years, what would be that field or that product which will change a lot of things from the agent perspective?
Um, Gosh, I think it's like I think a lot of it is just going to be getting agents that are domain specific to what we our specific domain. And maybe maybe I'll sort of give an example. I've like almost a decade ago, I was working on a company that was it was basically a construction app on an iPad. So you could walk around a construction site and you could make notes of, hey, the plans have changed on this particular thing, or there's an issue here and that kind of thing. And like it took that company, a few years to like get like wide usage, even though the iPad came out in 2011 or 2010, or I'm losing track of the years now. But like, and it took a while for it to get really good, right? And I think that like because just and I think it's going to be the same for a lot of applications in our lives. Like the consumer chatbots are always going to make a big difference in our lives, right? Claude and ChatGPT. But when we're talking about business applications, it's going to happen more slowly and it's going to happen domain by domain. There's two ways of looking at that. One is it's like, oh gosh, well, it's just going to take more time for people to build the specific thing to our industry and whatever. The other thing is that you, as a individual PM or engineer, you might be able to significantly advance the state of the art in a particular industry just by yourself, just by
Hmm.
building an AI feature in your domain, in a software that like already has like some users, or a new startup if you want to, if that's your cup of tea, but you may be able to significantly push the state of the art in your particular industry forward just by your efforts. And I think that's like a tremendously like empowering and exciting thing to know.
Yes. Also, I want to, understand how do you look at AI engineering, and what concepts within that excites you the most? Is it, the LLMs, or is it the reasoning part of it, or probably the multi-agent system? How do you describe
Yeah.
that?
Gosh, I mean, like, everyone is going to have different answers to this. Like, I'm always the guy that's excited about what's next. So, in sort of like what's next for the field, like this concept of agent learning, helping agents kind of improve their performance over time, which, like, if you think about humans too, right? Like, that's actually where agents have had a hard time mimicking humans, is because, a human employee, once they've been they're in their job for like 2 or 3 months, is, much better than when they've been in their job for like 2 days, right?
Hmm.
Whereas like that's not true for an agent right now. Most agents don't improve their performance over time. And so, agent learning, being able to take these like raw traces and sort of this output of the LMs and the output of our agentic applications and feed it back into the sort of the inner loop in order to like improve the performance. Like that's really exciting to me. And then sort of also taking that and getting it to sort of like bootstrap a set of evals. So you can call this like synthetic evals. There's different names for it.
Yeah.
But like these are both unsolved problems at the time. And I mean, maybe I'm just always a guy that's like drawn to the next problem or whatever. But I'm really excited. I mean, I'm really incredibly excited about obviously what we've built from Mastra and sort of helping people get up to speed with all the agentic primitives like memory and RAG and tools and evals and workflows and et cetera, and prompts. But I think I, as a person, just temperamentally, I'm always excited about the next,
Hmm.
the state of the art and pushing the frontier forward.
Got it. And from the AI agent perspective, if there is just one belief which you have, which most people
Yeah.
would probably disagree with, what would
Yeah.
that belief be?
I think, gosh, I think it's probably you can build agents. Um, I don't think most people believe they can build agents, and I don't think mo even most specialists don't feel that most people can or should be able to build agents. But we actually feel that people can build agents given the right tools, given the right sort of ideation. We just think that AI engineering is a new developer discipline, sort of like DevOps was, or sort of like data engineering was, 5 or 10 years ago. And there were some practices in the beginning that like were not very widely known. But like over time, devs learned from each other. They learned what the best practices were, and a discipline sort of emerged out of it. And now it's like there's lots of people that have careers as a data engineer, careers in DevOps, and so on and so forth. And there were a lot fewer of them, again, like 10 years ago. And we just think that's going to be the same thing. And it's AI engineering is just it's just going to be it's going to be a specialized type of software engineering, and any sort of good software engineer is going to be able to, if they want to, sort of transition to be an AI engineer.
Hmm.
And I would say that's a pretty controversial belief. And most outsiders don't believe they can make it in, and most insiders don't believe that outsiders should make it in. So,
Got it. Just one more question, just for fun, if you could hire or hire a AI agent to, take off some work from your daily
yeah.
routine, what would that work be?
Um, Probably, and I'm working on this a little bit, but like I spend a lot of time reviewing our docs, to make sure they're accurate, to make sure they tell the thing in the most clear and concise way, and to make sure that like every sentence says something, it sounds human, and it's as short as possible, but it has packs as much information in it as possible, and the code examples are as tight as they could be. So it'd probably something to help me with with that.
Got it. My last question to you would be, if Mastra succeeds in the way that you hope for, how would the world look like in next 5 years from now?
Yeah. So with Gatsby, hundreds of thousands of developers, learned React and sort of like web development through Gatsby. I think if we succeed with Mastra, millions or tens of millions of people will become AI engineers because of Mastra.
Hmm, got it. Yeah, so for the audience here, what is it that they can, learn from you, or something that you would like to share with all of them, and how can they reach out to you if they want to?
I mean, I'm on Twitter X as like HalkSam. That's usually a good place to find me. Follow me, DM me, etc. there. Um, gosh, I, it's hard to say. It's hard to say anything that's wide and genuine. I think the main thing that I can say is that for a lot of people, new things can be overwhelming. We were worried when we started off, when we started off this journey, we're all in our mid 30s. We're like, are we too old to learn this new thing? Can old dogs learn new tricks, And I think like, and it took us, a little while to like ramp up to speed. And I think a lot of people ask themselves the same kind of question. They're sort of like when they see a new thing, they're not just judging the new thing as on its own. They're
Hmm.
also judging like, can I do it? Can I be part of this, or is it just going to be the thing that makes me into the over the hill, person, the person that's a has been, and the person that's skilled in the old thing but doesn't know that. And I think like the thing that I would like to impart to sort of everybody listening is this agents and AI are incredibly exciting, and you can figure out how to be part of it in your career, right? It's still so early, and people think that it's late and it's missed them, and that's not the case. This field is going to grow 10x, 100x, in the coming, years, and you can be part of it. Just, put yourself to it, learn the basics, build, try around and play with things. It also might not happen at your job. You might have to spend, evenings or weekends just playing around and building things on your own. But if you're willing to do that, if you're willing to put in the effort, you can figure out how you can be part of this.
Got it. Thanks a lot, Sam, for your time here and sharing your experiences and your
Mhm.
knowledge about AI and AI agents with
Mhm.
all of us. And I hope a lot of people will understand and start building agents after seeing this video. So thanks a lot for your time.
Thanks, Akash. Thanks for having me here. It was really a pleasure.